So, Alannah Weston, creative director at Selfridges in 2004, deputy chair of the board in 2014, chair of the board in 2019, 18 years at the very heart of Selfridges and the Selfridges Group. During that time, I think anybody who can read and get onto the internet will tell you that sales and profitability significantly increased, and the association of Selfridges as a company that is seeking in a truly authentic way to further sustainability and sustainability goals is something that I think is unassailably true. Both of those two things are significantly, if not exclusively, linked to the person who we're about to hear from tonight. So I wanted to start by asking you, everybody has a kind of aha moment. Everybody has a moment where they begin to think about sustainability and purpose in different ways. And the law has it that yours was in 2011 with Project Ocean at Selfridges. So tell us about that.
So can I just start by saying that I'm a founder member of this club, and when Paul told me that he was going to start a club for people like us, I thought he was completely crazy and that it would never work, but I signed up anyway, and I'm just so delighted to see everybody enjoying themselves as they always do. But anyway, no, it was actually just after Copenhagen, and my brother and a childhood friend of mine who was a scientist had been there, and they came back very, very disappointed at what hadn't been achieved. And we were sitting around the breakfast table, and I said, well, the problem with all you conservationists is you're so busy selling the problem, and you need to start selling the solution. So my brother, in his typical way, said, well, if you're so great, why don't you do something about it? And then Jonathan said, well, can we have some windows at Selfridges? So that was the beginning of Project Ocean. And it took 2 years to come about. Nobody in the business believed we were really going to do it. And some of my colleagues remember going to meetings where it's not actually going to happen. But it did, and we threw our whole creative arsenal behind the issue of overfishing. And so, we had the windows, we had the Prince of Wales, we had Noah and the whale, we had fashion designers like Catherine Hamnett, we collaborated with all of these NGOs. And so that was really my sort of baptism. And that was when I began to understand that, it was all very well doing something for the fish, but that wasn't what our customers really cared about. And what they were saying is this is fantastic, but what about fashion? And what about your core business? And so that was the beginning of understanding what a sustainability plan might need to look at. So we did things in the reverse. Most people do they build their plan, they do their hygiene, and then they launch it to the world. But we launched it, and then we had to go back and say, oh my goodness, how do we actually tackle this beast? And, whatever it is, I think 11 years on, we're still working at it every day, because that's what you have to do.
So let's fast forward 11 years forward and then and talk about Project Earth, which is a sort of successor to Project Ocean, and then we'll sort of fill in the gaps in between. But tell us a little bit about what Project Earth is seeking to do.
So Project Earth was the sort of, I guess, the sequel. But what we wanted to make sure with Project Earth, the same as Project Ocean, we carried it on. So it carried on in our fish supply chain, it carried on in our relationships with NGOs. And Project Earth was taking it much, much deeper into the business across categories. So what we did in Selfridges was to address what we call mindsets, models, and materials. And I suppose the flagship solution, because I really do believe solutions are important to communicate, was circular. So rent, resale, reuse, recycle, all of the R's. And I had an idea at the time that, the future business model could look like this, which is 50% what we call buying better, which is sustainable or more sustainable product, 25% circular, and 25% experience. And so that was the beginning of the conversation. So, because sometimes you have to throw out a big dream before you can walk towards it, and that's how we began. And so Project Earth was kind of an experiment to say, okay, well, we did a lot of research. The customers said they wanted circular. They said they would resell and repair. Those were the two things. Rent, they weren't so sure. And out we came with the experiments, and we've learned a tremendous amount. And it's true that actually, it's funny, English, they like to repair. I don't know what that says, but they also, and you can see my shoes, which have been, restored in the Selfridges trainer repair shop. And so it's been an enormous success, to the point that it's given us the confidence to now double down on circular. And anyone who follows Selfridges on LinkedIn will see we're recruiting like mad for for our innovation lab, which is going to be totally devoted to the circular solution. So you can kind of see it's taken time, but we're now here where we really take it seriously as a business model that we think that we can scale. And I think that's the most exciting thing about circular.
Okay, so let's wind back a little bit. When we were talking earlier, we said, the core of this conversation is about the nexus between profit and purpose. And given this is a Conduit audience, we're going to speak a lot about purpose, but let's not neglect the profit part. And had you presided over a failing department store, had it been Barney's, or had you succumbed to the barbarians at the gate of the form of Amazon, you would have not been able to do the purpose stuff that you did. So you have to be profitable, and you succeeded in being profitable. So tell this audience a little bit about that, your mindset, your approach, how you thought about profitability, because that's the bedrock upon which this other stuff is built.
I mean, I think one of the great things about Selfridges is that it's rooted in innovation. And so our brand, going back way, way, way before me, back to Gordon Selfridge, and I'm sure you've all seen the program, it was about bringing the customer things they didn't know that they wanted, and bringing extraordinary experiences and celebrating innovation. And so it was really rooted in our DNA. So the idea of looking to the future comes really naturally to us as a team and as a brand. So I think that was our first strength. The fact that we were doing very well in terms of the way we thought about customer. This is just an extension of that, and I think I really feel that it's so important that you don't sort of say, well, here's all our sustainability work stream on one side, and then here's all the stuff that makes money on the other. It can be like that for a period of time, but you've got to embed it right into the strategy. And so the work that Anne and I have done across the group over the last 3 or 4 years has been embedding that strategy, and a lot of internal, you can call it convincing, agitating, persuading, and then just fucking do it, kind of stuff. But there's an awful lot that has to go along with it, and that is to convince people that it's possible, to convince people that it's necessary, to convince people that there is no other way. So I often give the example of digital. Digital is the easiest way to explain sustainability to a finance director. And because, we know that anybody who, the video stores are now closed, so are the CDs, so are the HMVs, so are and so do you want to be one of those? You don't. And so sustainability will be a much, much bigger disruptor than digital, I believe. It may even disrupt digital because of the reasons that we know about, whether it's energy or distribution or looking after people in the right way. So you've got to take that chance, and you've got to, and I think it's a safe thing to bet on. So when I'm faced with a conversation around financials, I always say this is the safest bet you will ever have, because this has to happen, otherwise we're all dead. And if we're first, we can do really, really well. The customer wants it, and there's innovation. And if that's part of your brand, then you can just go for it. So I'm making it sound easy because it's really, really not. But I think those are the principles to bring it inside the strategy rather than some kind of parallel.
So that's got to be right. On the other hand, I was saying to you earlier, I went to an event yesterday with the Sustainable Viticulture Foundation about vineyards, and this group of really amazing visionary winemakers described how they switched to biodynamic and regenerative vineyards. And in the switch, the first 2 years, the yields go down, and then the second 2 years, they go back up, and then onwards, they have much more resilient vines, much better wine, they resist the heat and the heat waves way better, and they make a bet on the future. Yeah. But there is this idea of a switching cost, that there's a period when you go from, oh, I like doing something in the oceans in 2011 and putting it in the windows, to turning around the supertanker that is Selfridges. And so did you, when you said to people, your finance directors, let's bet on the future, did you have moments where you had to say, and we are going to go through a valley?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I suppose, again, going back to innovation, the fashion industry is used to that. So you're used to the brand cycle, where brands decline and you have to replace them even though it's a big number, and you've got to find the next thing. So in a way we were able to do, but I'll give you an example. Fur is a really good example, but that we've been out of fur in the UK, I think, since 2004. But in Canada, where our business Holt Renfrew was founded as a furrier, it's been a much tougher journey, and it's cold, and so but being able to look at those executives and say, but this category is downtrending. Why would you double down? Why wouldn't you look for ways to replace that category and that material? And that's just good business. And I think that's the message I really want to say to people is that this isn't just a sort of wacky kind of hobby. This is good business by planning for the future. And we were talking earlier about, and when you look at the fossil fuel industry or the car industry or the agricultural industry or the fertilizer industry, you sort of go, what part of them is asleep? And so, but I don't mean to underestimate the risk and the difficulty of the transition, but those are the kinds of ways that you have that conversation. So yes, you will lose in a category for a period of time. We did the same thing with plastic, single-use water bottles. And actually what we found was that people switching to glass was more profitable for us. So, I mean, it's a little controversial. I'm not so sure how I feel about the water bottle specifically, and I bet there are people who know a lot more about water bottles than I do here. But it's an example of how you can transition successfully. But I think it's, the thing what I really think is the big opportunity is waste. And I don't think that our industry is, because it's a high margin industry, is as focused on waste and the carbon that sits behind that waste that we might be. So that could be a way to pay for some of the other stuff you want to do.
So we'll return to waste in a moment, because I definitely want to talk about that. But I want to talk about the sourcing and the carbon inputs into the products that you sell, and some of your efforts to gain greater transparency into all the materials that are in all the products in Selfridges, so you can't manage what you can't measure, and to try and get greater visibility on that and the systems that you're implementing. Tell us a little bit about that.
So this is about the spreadsheet. So this I have to say, this is what we call material. So it's the hardest thing to do because as a retailer, you don't have transparency of your supply chain. And so I was very lucky to work with an excellent sustainability director. And when I would be tearing my hair out, she would say, tiny conversations lead to great things. And so going into those showrooms, and I think there's a few brands here today, but going into those showrooms and saying, where did it come from? Who made it? How far did it travel? Those kind of conversations had ripple effects throughout those brands. And the sustainability directors used to be like, yes, Selfridges are here. You know, they're going to ask the question. And you wouldn't believe some of the answers we would get. I mean, you'd go in and you'd ask somebody where, and they'd say, it's a trade secret, we cannot possibly tell you. Or they would say, we'd say, but well, is it certified X material? Absolutely, absolutely. And then you say, well, which certification? Oh, we'll get back to you. I mean, it was kind of a Wild West situation. And so, but I think what's happened in the last 10 years is that all of those brands have come on board. We have the TFCD, we have so many more structures around regulation. And so the conversations we're having now with them are really, really productive. But if we hadn't put in that groundwork, trained our buyers, and gone out with our ETRs and all of those kinds of things, we wouldn't be in the state we are now. And what's exciting, and I actually came to a dinner here 3 years ago and said with a bunch of tech people, do you remember? And I said, any of you can come up with some blockchain technology that can track the luxury supply chain, please call me. And incidentally, that's something we're doing right now. So we're just about to sign with a company that have worked closely with us to build that technology in order to completely transform our buyer's worksheet. So, and just seeing, I was at a breakfast 2 days ago with a buyer, a tech person, and a guy from the shop floor, all of whom are green warriors, because we have like 180 green warriors in Selfridges across all functions. And they were passionate about this tool. And, these are people who, it's not really what usually turns them on, but because they knew that they were going to be able to say to their customer or to their brand, we know exactly what's in the product that we're selling. And the confidence and the pride that they have as a result of that transparency. And luxury has always been about secrecy, and this isn't going to be a massive transformation to move from concepts of secrecy, rarity, to transparency. And instead of rare animals, I mean, that's what it was really built on. Let's talk about extraordinary people. And the people who are making the things, and the people who are paid properly to make the things, hopefully. So this whole luxury business is going through a massive transformation, and I hope that Selfridges has been part of really making that come to life.
Wait. Green Warriors, discuss.
So the Green Warriors came after Project Ocean. One of the surprises, I mean, I was so naive with the whole thing, but what we didn't realize was how much our people were inspired by Project Ocean. They were the ones, more even than the customers, that really got behind it. And so they wanted to form a community. And we had, at that time, we had just started with Yammer, and so it was easier to form communities. And so we had this extraordinary gathering of people that said, we want to be Green Warriors. And one of their tasks, that what we had asked them to do was, when we were in the water bottle issue, we realized we'd taken them all out of the store, but they're all still in the office. And so one of the ideas the Green Warriors had was they would go around with stickers and stick them on your water bottle on your desk. And so this was a way of kind of saying, okay, well, our own people have the best solutions. So they would campaign, they would go on their beach cleans, and now they do other things. They plant trees, they go, they work with our charity partners. We have 5 volunteer days, paid volunteer days for every staff member at Selfridges. So whether you're a Green Warrior or not, you can volunteer. And these are all the things that I think give the business the soul that it has and the engagement that it has. But it wouldn't be possible if we didn't have a purpose.
I wanted to come back for a moment on your sourcing, and obviously sustainability is front and center, but obviously questions of labor and human rights are probably things that you think about as well. And enormous amounts of the world's cotton coming out of Xinjiang, and so how much of that do you attach visibility to as well, and how much of that presents both opportunities for transformation but also dilemmas in terms of what you put in the store?
Absolutely, and those are the conversations in the early days. We'd said, well, okay, if we get asked the question and we get the answer we don't like, what are we going to do? And so the philosophy at the beginning was, we work with our partners, so that we try to be collaborative, and we set timelines and we work alongside them. But then I have a long list of things that we have outlawed, straight from fur to single-use water bottles to plastic straws, and then now exotic skins, and and all kinds of other things in between. But still, it's tiny, actually, in reality, what we need to do. And we have a list of the big materials. So leather is massive elephant in the room, is where does your leather come from? And I remember going to a very respected group of brands about 5 years ago and asking them, and they said, well, we think 99% sure that we don't have Amazon leather in our supply chain. And I said, well, okay, well, let's put some labels and let's talk about this. No, because we can't be 100% sure. And this is the nature. I'll be honest with you, the luxury supply chain is not that different to the food supply chain. In fact, the food supply chain is way better tracked in terms of provenance because of all the health and animal welfare stuff that's gone before, and the organic movement and this kind of thing. But essentially, if you're buying cotton or you're buying polyester or you're buying, as a brand, it's really, really, and I talk to brands all of the time, and they say, this is what we're spending our time doing. And I'm beginning to wonder, although we're putting the money into the kit, are we asking the wrong question? Is this the right question for retailers? Is this the right question for brands? What's in it? Or should we be leapfrogging to something like, how many people owned this before you did? Rather than what's in it, because the what's in it it's a Sisyphean task. You will never know everything that's in something, and if every single retailer has to build a tracking system, then that could be a lot of resource that could be going into something else. So I think we're at this really sticky kind of point where everyone's tracking everything, everyone's having to declare everything. Anyone who works at a public company knows how much they have to declare, and maybe we either need the regulation to make it really simple. We do not sell that stuff. It's not about the customer choosing or the brand choosing or the retailer choosing, or we need to just create an appetite for something completely different to those complicated to understand things.
So it seems to me you've said two things, both of which are core to achieving sustainability in fashion. I want to kind of visit those in sequential order. The first is the waste question, right? grotesque levels of overproduction in fashion, an enormous amount of stuff that is just never used and then wasted and put into landfills or shredded or burnt, even worse. So how does a department store with plus £1 billion in annual sales help regulate and manage the question of overproduction and waste? I mean, how are you actually trying to tackle it?
Well, it would take me another 18 years. I mean, I think by asking the questions, that's all we can do, is to say, it's not all we can do. I mean, you've got different parts of it. So there's the parts that you control. So building the circular business model, making it happen, making it, creating a demand for something that is less wasteful. I'm not going to say it doesn't have any waste, but is less wasteful. Creating that mindset amongst your customers, amongst your team. That's one way. And then I think, there are so many ways to get waste out of the system in materials, and we're seeing. I mean, I saw this brand the other day called Son of a Tailor, and the whole bespoke element, which is where we used to be. And so I wonder sometimes whether fashion needs to go where food is going, which is kind of backwards, to say, actually, who are you? What do you need? Can I make it for you? Can I make it locally? And I think that's going to be a big part of it. But the other part of it is going to be scale. So scaling for good, I think, is something that the fashion industry needs to explore. And that could be on something like cotton. So if you imagine what would happen if you had a LVMH and Primark all agreeing to source their cotton in a certain way, and open sourcing some of their supply chain and that kind of thing, because that's where you start to get the scale for good. So I kind of think we have to do both. But then there's some really stupid things that go on in retail, which is, brand ships you a whole lot of stuff, you don't sell it all, you ship it back to the brand, and then the brand does whatever the brand does with it, and you just think, surely we have the technology to be able, the Stitch Fix or the whatever, to be able to say, okay, what do you want to buy, and how, what's your size, and should we buy it, rather than, so this is what I mean by systems change, is how do you actually challenge everything that you do. And I always say to my guys, look, you need to be lean and green. So use green to get lean. And we have a price on carbon. We have it now, right now. So let's use that for good, instead of, and all these conversations about where we're going to get our oil from. Well, how about using less? This is what I find bizarre. And yes, we are a business that has thrived on consumption, but it's therefore our responsibility to reinvent consumption. And that's why experience is interesting to me, because Selfridges has always been known for experience. So what experiences can you monetize in ways that are less harmful to the planet?
So we're going to jump to experience.
It's a bit of a brainstorm.
No, it's awesome. But so we're going to do experience, but I want to come to circularity for a moment, okay. Because and I mean, one of the things about system change, at least I think, is that it's not system change without winners and losers, because if the system stays the same, the incumbents stay the same. But with system change, you're going to have winners and losers, and you're going to have very significant degrees of disruption. And I can imagine in circularity, there's a whole category of people who produce new things who just lose if everybody's just buying secondhand things. Stores like yourselves are differently positioned, because you can continue to resell things and take a margin on those. How much margin, how does it work, ? But tell us a little bit about what's the business model for a department store like Selfridges in circularity, and how does that actually contribute meaningfully either to your top line revenue or to your EBITDA? Like, how does it work?
Anyone from Harrods here? No, I think we're exploring it at the moment. But to me, circularity it's like the flywheel. You have the customer circularity that goes with the product circularity. So the loyalty that you have because the customer is coming back and they're going to get something repaired, or they're going to get something, they're going to rent something, then that makes them make another visit, and then their commitment to you is there, and they feel good about you and you feel good about them. And so to me, it's kind of a no-brainer as part of the portfolio of offers that you make to the customer. I think what you've identified, which is how does it, all of us here are worried about just transition, and I don't have the answer today about how my transition into circular could affect the people who are making those products in the first place. And we've had many, you cannot imagine the conversations we've had about snakes. Just snake breeding in Vietnam is like sheep farming in Wales, and you need to know that. And we need to understand the impact on those communities when you move away from something as bizarre as snake farming. So I think this is something that the fashion industry needs to dig deeper into, and because we're global and we depend on some of the poorest people in the world for some of the stuff that we wear and we buy and we sell. So I don't have the answer, but anybody here who does, I think it would be really worth having that conversation.
Fabulous, noted. Now to come to experience, because my instinct, although this is probably not universally true, is that experience has a lower carbon footprint than goods. Somebody going to problematize that for sure in this audience, especially this audience. But tell us a little bit about how experience is going to be 25% of your business, how that works, how that creates a circularity and a flywheel that customers come in, how it builds brand loyalty, but the kind of forms of experience that can actually contribute towards sustainability and reinforce sustainability. Mm-hmm. I think the things that everybody here will be interested in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in retail, one of the things we talk about is dwell time. And so if my kids can come into Selfridges and have a skateboard lesson, then have lunch with me in a beautiful restaurant, then go downstairs and watch a movie in an amazing cinema, and then go have a Lola's cupcake on the way home, and maybe they get to buy a toy. That's a day out, and that is a solution for the parent, and it's a joy for the kid and for the entire family. So that's really what I mean by experience. And so how many experiences can you offer as part of the visit to Selfridges that are of value, and you hope that they do have a lower carbon footprint, and they should. And so, we all know, travel, all of these things are complicated, but I think getting on the tube and going to Oxford Street is a pretty good way to spend your day.
So now I want to come to a little bit about leadership, because, you went from creative director to deputy chair to chair of the board. And along the way, you've had to be, I think your words is be an agitator to take a large company and a team and an incumbency on a journey. Mm-hmm. You also have the great advantage of being substantial owners of the company. So in some ways you can agitate, and then you can just say, well, I've agitated, but I own the place. So it that helps a lot. But I'm interested in the persuasion and the duress models of leadership that you've had to deploy on your journey, and I think there'll be people in this audience who'll be interested in hearing examples of both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have the ultimate privilege, which is to own this extraordinary business for as long as we have, but I think that the people that we nurtured and hired and brought into the business shared that excitement about the possibility. And so it was always about possibility. So brand possibility, which then became sustainability possibility, and scary for many. And it did, I'll give you one example of what I had to do. So we had an exec team. This was in 2019, and I had spoken to our MD of the group and said, look, I really think this is the way we have to go and we need to rewrite the business strategy, and we need to place sustainability at the heart and show, oh my God. And so we had an away day, and I wanted to invite Paul Pullman to come and speak to the team. And because I thought an older white male might convince them, and he couldn't come. And so my MD cleverly said, well, why don't you do a podcast with him, and we'll record it and then play it to the team. And so we did, and that was how to lead a sustainable business was born. And I did actually persuade David Blood to come and talk to them, and he just blew them away. And people came out of that meeting feeling so confident, so hopeful, and so excited about what we were about to do. And then the ones that weren't, they're no longer there. And so, you kind of have to have the, you've got to bring the horse to water, and you've got to give people you've got to make it safe as well, because, and that was one of the big things. I'll give you another example. So what we've done recently is change the compensation. And I know this is a little controversial in sustainability circles, but I think it's very effective. If you manage on a balanced scorecard, to be able to put sustainability KPIs on that scorecard, it really does help to drive the conversation with people, because you can't be asking people to do stuff that is going to make them less profitable so they don't get their bonus. You've got to be able to balance those things. The sweet spot, though, and I will continue to say this, is when you're reducing cost and being sustainable at the same time. And that's where the lean and green kind of comes in. And I think that's something that a lot of businesses need to crack. So yeah, so there's a carrot and a stick approach to executives. For teams, it's a lot easier. They want to do this stuff. And we are in the most unprecedented, 3.6% unemployment in the UK. I mean, there's a talent crunch crisis, whatever you want to say. And if you don't have purpose, if you don't have genuine ways to prove that you are, because they will call you out, if you're greenwashing. I mean, I call our general workforce, I call my kids Generation C, because for COVID and climate, and Generation C do not want to work for a company that doesn't have purpose and doesn't deliver on the purpose every single day. And so whether that's around diversity, whether that's around ecology, whether that's around just transition and all of those issues to do with supply chain, it's kind of become table stakes. And I think that's been the shift since COVID. And through that period, I found the conversations we were having in 2019, the conversations we're having now are completely different. And I'm sure many of you will feel that, particularly on diversity, but also on supply chain. So did I answer the question?
Yes, you did.
Yes.
So you've been both an executive and a kind of insurgent executive, and your kind of accountabilities there are KPIs. Insurgent executive, of course. We'll probably have them somewhere at reception at the Conduit. And then you've been the deputy chair and the chair of the board, and then you've had to be a fiduciary, and you've had to think about fiduciary duty towards shareholders, and you've had to think of things through a slightly different prism. And sort of somewhat a bit of a geeky question, but it's also those two roles, how have those been different when you thought about sustainability and leadership, and what did you see in yourself and the way you led in switching between being an executive and being a board member and then a chair of the board?
I mean, it's been interesting because my personal journey I think has run parallel with a lot of change in the industry. There was a succession plan change within the family. So it's been very interesting, but I guess for me, as creative director, it was very live. You were doing something and you're doing the next thing, and you were working with a team of people, and you had the budget and the team and the program, and you just got stuff done. When you move into board position, it's all about the people. So it's all about identifying the right people on your team and then motivating them and asking them the right questions. And I think, as you can see, we're probably over time. I talk a lot, but listening. So the biggest learning for me was be a better listener. Be a better listener. Ask better questions, and make sure that you are empowering the people that you've hired to do their best. And so a lot of times what I say to people is, you've got to come at sustainability through your strengths. So if you're a product person, go after finding that exclusive brand that makes things the way no one else does. If you're a financial person, go after the waste, go after all of the carbon cost. If you're a creative, tell the story in a way that nobody else can. And I think that was my way of motivating my team, because not everybody is on board at the beginning, and people are scared, and it's new, and so being able to listen to their challenges, but also motivate them by saying, you can do this because you are a great whatever it is, was a step. And then I think the other thing is about what I've learned is about setting really, really clear objectives. So again, that balanced scorecard, and spending the time up front with people, which they hate, going through objectives and saying, okay, but why? Putting the why into the room, because a lot of times people will say, well, I'm going to make this much more, or I'm going to sell this much more, I'm going to have this many customers. Well, why? How does that add up to our vision? How does that add up to our purpose? And so I think then once you've put the time into that, you all know this stuff, but it's just, my experience, but you then can step back and let people actually do stuff and not be crawling all over them, because you still have the conversation once a week, once a month, once a quarter on those things. So clarity and listening, probably my two things.
So I'm going to ask you a final question, and then we're going to turn over to the audience for theirs. You described earlier that you were involved, you saw your role and you wanted to talk about system change in the fashion industry, and you thought about what Selfridges did to provoke, catalyze, and accelerate system change. So there's a bunch of people in this room who are from the industry, in the industry, thinking about it all the time. So just do a little bit of a zoom back from a system change perspective and just say, what are the things that are works in progress, but the work streams of things that we need to do in order to make system change happen? You've alluded to a bunch of them, but I just think it would be useful before we go over to the audience is to sort of give the buckets of things that people are working on and that we need to be focusing on in order to achieve the change we need to, in the speed we need to.
So I would go back to those M's, so mindset. And I think the great danger of a place like this is that we think that everybody thinks like us, and they don't. And I went to talk, it was a very good lesson. I went to talk to my daughter's school a few months ago, and I said to them, what is the most important criteria in your decision-making on buying a product? Price. Okay, so, we got to hear that. And then the next thing I asked them is, what's going to be the most important criteria for you choosing a job? Salary. And these are 15 and 16-year-olds. So, you forget that at your peril. And for all the sort of trends and things, there are people who faced with choices, and people not as privileged as us, and people more privileged than us, but they are making those choices on a daily basis, and we've got to listen, and we've got to be in them. So mindset, how do you change that mindset? And I think luxury has the most incredible opportunity to change to change a new lexicon for luxury, that this jacket is beautiful because it's, by the way, secondhand, has been hacked by an artist and has been sitting in my wardrobe for 20 years. You know, and that is why I like it. And so changing values, you know, we've got to change our value set, how we define growth. You know, what is growth? And within what boundaries are we prepared to grow? The great thing about being a creative is that creatives love a boundary, because it gives them something to kick against and shape and make things different and problem solve in a different way. So mindset's huge. Models, and the models come out of the mindset. So addressing the models. Why do I do it like that? I mean, I've been fascinated. I mean, this tragedy in Ukraine, and talking about, I heard a program on the radio about farmers growing soy in Brazil, and their problem is they can't get any fertilizer because of Ukraine, and then what they're going to do, but they need to ship that soy back to England to feed the chickens for the chicken nuggets. Who thought of that? Like, which bright spark thought, we'll chop down some trees, grow some stuff, but we fertilize it with some other stuff that comes up? Like, no. And so I think actually really challenging our notions of scale. I mean, I grew up, you know, thinking about scale is good, but right now it's really not working for us. So we need to challenge the models. We need to challenge the values, and then on materials, that's just tech. That's just people getting better at mapping it, making it transparent, and then doing it differently. And we were talking today, whether it's inventing meat substitutes, moving. I mean, I was talking to an executive the other day, and he said, if I moved all my cotton that I make, shirting, whatever it is, to linen, my carbon footprint would drop by X%. So those are the systems changes that can happen out of focus on things like materials. And in my industry, it's all about materials. So yeah, materials, models, mindsets, those would be the themes I would go after.
Amazing. Well, I'm now going to, having hogged the mic, going to turn it over to you, and there are a couple of hands. So Rosie, why don't we start with Mima?
Hi. You said that you send back to the brands what you haven't sold, but this is the in consignment model, that it's not for everything you buy. So my question is, what do you do with the end of season stock that is not sold? I mean, because I work with young designers, and most of them, some of them, they upcycle, and they upcycle in a couture way. But they can't get stock from department stores. And I think one of your biggest responsibility is to change the mindset of the brand, of the people, by doing these things. So again, what do you do with the stock?
Well, genuinely, we do, it goes back. So it's marked down. So we have the sale and it's marked down. But many luxury brands don't like to mark it down because it's bad for their brand. So they take it back. And we all have read what some of them do with it and what some of them don't do with it. But they have their own distribution networks, so they deal with it. But what we are doing, which is quite exciting, we're just testing out in Ireland, is rental. So something isn't selling, put it on the rental rail and make it much cheaper. And that is a way of bringing stuff into the circular.
So you don't buy from brands? I mean, I've worked with the biggest group, and they don't give on consignment to department stores.
We buy.
So,
no, we do.
so it's about
Anne's
buying.
Going to kill me. We do, but then you negotiate. So you mark down most of the stuff, but there is stuff that brands would rather have returned. So that's a negotiation. So all of these things are negotiated, and some of, so 50% of what's in Selfridges is concession. So that's already, I mean, I'm getting a bit technical, but we can maybe talk afterwards. But I think generally the principle is that I was trying to say is, let's not have the carbon footprint because we didn't buy well. So let's buy better because we know our customer better, and then we don't have to have that conversation, and they don't have to have the conversation with us. So it's about being smarter.
Jude, I have a question about your about the inherent tension between, on one hand, having, actually, I was in Selfridges and I walked around behind one wall, and there were sort of, say, vintage or pre-loved, Dior bags, and on the other side of that wall was a Dior boutique.
Yeah.
And how do you manage that tension? Because I'm sure, Dior probably has their own priorities, and obviously they're there to sell their new stuff, but on the other side of this wall is vintage Dior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's tense. I'll acknowledge that. I think that we, again, going back to digital, it's that question of what is going to be the mix in future. And so if our most mature digital business is 30% digital and the rest stores. So what are the models that are going to work best? And that's why I say you're never going to be 100% circular in a department store. And so what are the other answers? And is experience an answer? And is having better materials an answer? So I would be, in my conversations with Dior, having all three conversations to say, will you do circular? Will you do, what's your stuff made of and where is it made? And what are the experiences that we can offer the customer that are going to make it more exciting, as well as, or instead of buying the stuff. But I acknowledge there's a lot of tension at the moment. It doesn't appear to be consistent, but that's because we're in transition.
Thank you. I'm Christopher Clem. I'm a co-founder of a company called Power from Plastic. As you can gather, that's waste being turned into power. We do all kinds of waste, not just plastic. It's all non-recyclable waste. It goes to something useful, power, which is needed today. We develop, we build these installations. We even have a data platform, or building a data platform, which will accelerate the whole process. Now, in our business development discussions, we talk to a lot of fashion brands. And we all know, as you explained, that customers are concerned about the supply chains, the sustainability of the supply chain. But we were also told that they're increasingly concerned about the downstream disposal chain. And if you think about it, a garment, when it's delivered to a shop, it needs to be in plastic, it needs to be transparent, it needs to be clean, everything. So all these shops have bags and mountains of plastic piling up. So what happens with all of that? So two questions, really. One is, would you, or could you comment on that view that we were told that customers are increasingly concerned about the sustainability of the downstream disposal chain, number one. Number two, the other question is what do you do with your logistics companies, with all that plastic and other forms of waste, considering that there is technology around that can turn that unwanted feedstock, which is not recyclable, into carbon neutral power, not in a large incineration plant, but in a very small mini power station which sits right outside the distribution center.
Is this a sales pitch?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
Okay, and now Alannah will answer the question. Yeah, go. Yeah.
Call me. I think it's a great idea. I think anything that can turn waste into power is a brilliant idea. And I think, as I said, being lean and green is where all of us have to get to with our operations, and there has got to be opportunity. Incidentally, one thing we did a kind of Dragon's Den for our team across the group, and we asked them to come up with a sustainable solution. And the Dutch team, who were fed up seeing all of this plastic coming in with the clothes from the warehouse, designed what they call, what is it called? It was I called it a shroud. Maybe it was better in Dutch than it was in English, but basically it was something to cover the rail, because the clothes come on big rails and it covers the rail. So there would be one reusable piece of cotton rather than bags and bags and bags. And it took them less time to unpack, and it was more sustainable. And so we then rolled that out through across the group. So these, but you know, it's collaboration. We have to work with the brands because they're the ones that ship the stuff in the plastic. But honestly, the amount of waste that goes on behind the scenes is just unacceptable. And whether we turn it into power or we don't create it in the first place, we need to make those changes, and we need the people who have got the innovations to help us.
Jeremy, can somebody give Jeremy and Mike?
Great. Well, Alannah, first of all, thank you for what was really actually an inspiring description of the journey that you've been on, and I'm sure there were sort of challenges along the way, but you're certainly making huge progress. You're a very particular part of a wider industry, and in a way, you know, you have a set of challenges at the higher end of the industry, but the mass market of it and the fast fashion, if you will, is where 90% of the problem resides. Help us think a little bit. I know it's not directly right in your wheelhouse, but you're part of that broader system. Right? Help us think about how you and Selfridges and the luxury end of the market can make a difference in influencing the other 95% where the overwhelming bulk of the problem sits.
Well, I guess again, it comes down to creating demand. You know, creating that consumer demand for more sustainable product or for resale. And so, if somebody aspires to fashion, wherever they sit in the hierarchy, in the price hierarchy, they should have a circular option. And I think when we did, one of my favorite projects was the project we did with Oxfam, because we gave Oxfam the pride of place on the second floor, right next to Gucci, and you got kids coming in saying, I can shop at Selfridges now because I can buy something for £5 or £10. And then you got ladies who normally shopped in the luxury coming and going, oh my goodness, it's such a beautiful scarf. Is it really only £40? And so you were actually taking both ends of the market and changing their perception. And I hope that that's what we can bring as a thought leader and a fashion leader to the wider industry, is to say, okay, well, what's the customer of the future going to want, and how are you going to deliver it for them at a price they can afford?
Thank you, Paul. And Alannah, thank you so much. I think the more leadership like you are in the retail community, the better for this world. My name is Tanya, and I'm a founder of Cycon, Circular Concierge. We help retail companies move to circular business models profitably. So I have two questions for you. It's not a sales pitch. First one is, what transparency disclosures are actually your customers looking for? Is it tons of CO2 or kilograms of CO2 per item? Liters of water per item? You know, kilograms of waste? And the second one, so you've mentioned that repair and resell are the most popular options in the circularity. I wonder, how do you plug in things like, choosing the right care products for the items that you sell, choosing the right cleaning provider, or dry cleaning or wet cleaning, donations. How do you plug that in together into your circular business model? Thank you.
And I should say rental is growing too, but I'll answer the second question first. So with Project Earth, one of the things that we experimented a lot with was cleaning products, and it was huge. I mean, there's a brand, I can't remember what they're called, but they say never wash your jeans. You just make them smell better, or you put them in the fridge, or all this kind of stuff. So I think that's definitely a growth area, and then really, it's better for them. And then your other question was, what do customers want in terms of labeling? There are a lot of really interesting cross industry collaborations going on right now. The SMI, which is Prince of Wales initiative, is working on a product labeling program at the minute, and also in the US there's another project. So I think there's a lot of research going on, and I can put you in touch with the people who are working on it, because you know, it's a bit like, what do people want? Sometimes I just think, again, it's the wrong question. So like with the fish, we had this debate, will we put red rated fish but just label them? And it's like, no, get rid of them. Get rid of the red-rated fish. Don't sell them. Then you have the conversation about the yellow-rated fish. And this is what retailers are faced with. And, you know, we'd just like some legislation, please, if there are any legislators in the room that would simplify it. But I think the trouble with certifications is that there's certification trends. So palm oil, you know, was a thing. And now we're not sure whether maybe palm oil is better than not palm oil, and so, but then you see whole changes happening, like fur, gone from the industry. It's extraordinary in my career to see that as a whole sector gone. So I think you know, it's much easier when it's much clearer, and it's a product that you can just get out of. But cotton is minefield. It's an absolute minefield. But to me, cotton and leather and polyester should probably go, unless he can burn it and turn it into something. But yeah, it's a tough one to know. That's any answers, please.
We're going to start running out of time at the very back there. Yeah.
So
Okay, please, you got a mic. Go.
Thank you.
Yeah, go for it.
So last couple of months, we've seen luxury brands make political statements in terms of Ukraine, withdrawing sales from Russia. With political things like climate change and frustrations coming to a head, can you see Selfridges making political statements and refusing to serve luxury to countries that deliberately don't meet climate targets?
So refusing to serve those customers because their countries don't make the climate targets?
So I'm thinking more in terms of when I worked for Selfridges, we did a lot in China, and Glasgow happened, and then they're opening coal stations frequently. Okay. So 20 years down the line, for example, if they're still doing that, could you see Selfridges becoming even more political and saying, we're not going to ship to China?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think that we have to start where we can make the best impact now. We are growing our domestic customer all the time, and I think that's one of our strengths as a brand, although we do have tremendous incoming customer from abroad. But I'm going to think about that, because that puts your political responsibility on a whole nother level. And I think I've been thinking more about how do I manage the supply chain for the customer that I have, as opposed to excluding customers. But right now the world is in quite extraordinary place. So you probably couldn't rule that out. But I think I'm going to say not yet as the answer. It's a really good question. Thank you.
Dinner table conversation afterwards. Yep, please.
Hiya, thank you both so much. Really, really interesting. I'm Abby, I'm the co-founder at Compare Ethics. I really wanted to stay with the ESG disclosure questions. And, you know, what I'm seeing with a lot of global retailers is that there's a massive pressure cooker from investors, regulators, consumers. Do you find that once you get this data into the business, that there's a real tension between how you build that capacity to communicate to these different stakeholders within the market? Would love to hear a bit more about how you see ESG disclosure to all these different stakeholders. Big question, not to end on, I appreciate it.
It's a huge one. I mean, we're a private company, so we don't have to publish, but we have started publishing. And so I think that everybody needs to get their house in order. But at the same time, I think what the regulators are starting to realize as well is that 2050 or 2040 or maybe aren't as useful. They're useful to set a direction, but actually what you need to know is what are you doing in the next 5 years? So we have our stairway and we focus on that. And what we've done is we built our stairway before TFCD and all of the others. So now we're trying to calibrate to make sure that if we did screen ourselves through those SASB or any of the others, that we would be relevant, and we feel pretty confident that we are. But you know, I mean, this is an industry in itself, is regulating the regulator, and I don't really know. That's why I sometimes wonder whether it's the right question, like whether us all tying ourselves up in knots about every single thing. You've got to go for impact. You've got to go for results for the planet right now. And so being able to make those decisions, I think is where we should focus our energy. And that's why I was so thrown by your question, because I'm so focused on making the impact on my customer, on my industry right now.
So with that, I think we're going to end, just because we could be here forever. And I wanted to do an enormous vote of thanks for everything that you've done being here and for your leadership. And although you've sold the company has been sold, I think on behalf of all of us, we're going to dragoon you into continuing to play a role in the fashion industry. I hope you write a book, and you'll be around for a little bit now. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.